Cybersecurity concerns are ever evolving. OT cybersecurity is even more complex, and it's so much more than just software and hardware. How do you stay on top of it all? Aaron Crow has over 25 years experience with cybersecurity. 15 of those years focused on operational technology across multiple industries, and he wants to help you. Welcome to the Protect OT Cybersecurity Podcast, brought to you by Industrial Defender. Now here's your host, Aaron Crow.
Hey, thank you very much for joining me today. I would love for you to introduce the listeners to who you are, give us your background, and kind of what are we going to talk about today?
Hello, Aaron. Thank you for the opportunity to sit here with you and to talk about a very important initiative that we're working on. I'm Emilio Salabarria. I work for Cyber Florida, also known as the Florida Center for Cybersecurity. We are hosted at the University of South Florida in the Tampa area. This project is the Cybersecurity Critical Infrastructure Risk Assessment that the state of Florida legislature has assigned to Cyber Florida so that we can conduct the risk assessment and submit 2 reports to the state legislature, the governor, and the Florida Cybersecurity Advisory Council with recommendations that are actionable that they can act on either through legislation or through mandates or some other kind of maybe executive orders from the governor itself. So we started this project in October of 2022. But before I continue, first let me give you a little bio of myself. Like I said, I joined Cyber Florida July of 22. Before that, I worked for Tampa Electric Company. I was emergency management director, did a lot of work with storms and hurricanes, preparedness exercises, drills, and pre-planning, business resilience. I also worked for Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation as a global life safety manager, did somewhat similar life safety, planning, exercises, first aid. I worked for the Tampa Port Authority a year and a half as the Director of Safety and Training, pretty much the same thing around the planning and exercises and preparedness. And the bulk of my adult life, I worked for Tampa Fire Rescue, 29 years, started as a firefighter, worked my way up the ranks to Division Chief of Special Operations, where I had the unique opportunity to do a lot of planning, exercises, and scheduling for some pretty big events. So Gasparilla Parades that occur every year in Tampa, Super Bowl 43, and then the big one of all is the 2012 Republican National Convention that we had in Tampa. So really some great experiences, which I feel helps prepare me for what I'm doing here today around this critical infrastructure risk assessment. So that's about me and a little bit more about this assessment. So we started October last year, and we started with 73 names and 73 email addresses. And we knew early on, this is a grassroots campaign. We got to get in front of people. We got to talk to them, make them aware, get them to participate in the CSET tool, which we've partnered with Idaho National Lab, and they've created a CSET tool instance just for Florida. We're going to use their cybersecurity framework. That's what we're measuring against. It's about in 108 questions, but we've added ransomware readiness assessment, which is another 48. So it's a total of 156 questions that we're asking these entities to complete. Now, we're trying to attract all 16 sectors, all 54 subsectors. We want to hear from everyone in the state of Florida. Whether you're public or private, it doesn't matter. To me, I see all of us as interrelated. We are all connected. We all use water. We all use electricity. We all use communication. So if one sector was to get hit, it could easily impact another sector. So this survey is anonymous. We're not asking for names of companies. We're not asking for your address. We would like to know the zip code of your headquarters, your employee size, your customer size, and your revenue. And the only reason we're asking for those 3 demographic questions is so we can figure out what the consequence would be if a particular sector was hit. So if the energy sector was hit, we would know customer base, employees, and revenue that would impact the state of Florida. So this report that we're going to send to the state, which we have sent one already on January 9th, had some early trends that we found. And the trends are still pretty consistent, even up to today. So the flyers we would mail out through email. And we started, like I said, with 73. And we asked them to please email it to your network and so on and so forth. And I knew it was working because a few weeks later, someone emailed the flyer to me. Then I knew it is out there and it's circulating in the state.
It's spreading. It's spreading. That's awesome.
Absolutely. So that made me feel real good.
Yeah.
So we started getting in questions, emails, and we will always say the same thing. We are happy to go to you. We will do it in person. We will do it virtually by Teams or Zoom or whatever system you use. We'd be very happy to get in front of your group and talk to them about the risk assessment. So I talked about the risk assessment, but I really haven't talked about how we're doing it. So Aaron, do you have any other questions or?
Yeah, I mean, high level so this is amazing. So the state of Florida is putting this together and they really want to understand what the people and the businesses and the entities that make up Florida and the things that make us be able to buy equipment and drive to the gas station. And for people like me from Texas can come in there and enjoy the beaches and make sure that everything works and the cruise ships come in and out. So they're really just reaching out to all those entities to understand, where are you in your cyber journey? Even if it's, I haven't started, I don't know, and really just answer some of those basic questions to get a kind of a baseline and then kind of take that from a what's next step. Would that be accurate?
Yes, it is. And we at Cyber Florida see this as an ongoing effort. This is not a one and done effort. It would be senseless to put that much money towards a risk assessment and not follow up with it.
Sure.
Either through validation or through training or a variety of other exercises or other options that the state has. So the risk assessment, like I told you, we're with Idaho National Lab.
Yep.
The CSET tool. We are focusing on, like I said, the 16 sectors. And some of the benefits is this is already paid for by the state of Florida. So all the entities in the state don't have to pay for it. And I know some risk assessments can be very expensive.
Yeah.
This one is paid for by the state. Every entity that signs into the tool, when they get to the very end, can copy, download, print, save their own risk assessment score and risk reports. They'll get a total of 7 for the cybersecurity framework, and then they can download their ransomware assessment as an 8th report. That's theirs to keep. Use as you need. Take it to your leadership. Take it to your CIO. Take it to your CISO, and let them know this is where we're weak. This is where we can apply some of our funds so that we can strengthen our cybersecurity posture for that particular entity.
So an assessment is a great start, right? Is getting those questions, understanding where they are. Like, what's the vision for what's next when you get all of these entities that give you these questions and you get a baseline of where they're at? Like, what's the next step for you guys?
The next step is our report due on June 30th. Now, keep in mind, legislature, one paragraph, Cyber Florida shall conduct critical infrastructure risk assessment and submit 2 reports, January 9th, June 30th, with actionable solutions to increase preparedness and resilience against significant cyber attacks for Florida. That was the statement that assigned us. So this is wide open. We knew that we really had basically a blank slate that we could work from. Well, by the way, to my knowledge, and we've done some research, no state has tried to do a statewide critical infrastructure risk assessment. This is the first of its kind. And I believe there's a lot of states watching us because I'm sure they would like to do the same thing. And we will be happy to help them and happy to let them know how we did it and how we got this far. So like I said, we started with 73 names, but as of today, we've had 269 CI entities sign into the tool, and 125 of them are 90% or greater complete in the CSET tool. But we've been able to take that subset of data, the 125, and analyze the inputs. And that's where we have some of the early trends, which I'll share with you in just a short time. So while you're doing your CSET tool, when you get to the end, you have an option to opt into additional cybersecurity training or cybersecurity resources. It's called Cyber Nights. Idaho National Lab has a program which will analyze your CSET tool inputs and data, and they can publish a report that will direct you to the trainings that you need to close some of those gaps and vulnerabilities in your entity. They can point to standards. They can also point you to a list of individuals that you can hire to help close that gap or reduce that vulnerability. Another thing we're working with Idaho National Lab is Cyber Champs, which is something that's a little different, but it does an analysis based on module. The first one is an organizational module. Based on the questionnaire that you send to the CIO of the company, it's going to figure out, based on the responsibilities of that CIO or the CISO, where are they in the organizational structure?
Sure.
And that organizational model will let you know, based on responsibilities, if it's in the right location or if it needs to be moved up, lower, or because a lot of companies have those roles, but may not have them plugged in the right place.
Yeah.
So that's something that's very important. Another one is the individual or technical module, which they'll send 30 questions to these individuals, and based on their responsibility, can say whether or not they are cybersecurity expert or technician or operator. I don't know all the terms because there's so many, but I know the audience listening understands, based on your responsibilities, you may be considered a manager, but really you're an administrator, or maybe it's the other way around. You're an administrator, right. You should be a manager. And then there's another one they send to managers to analyze their roles, their responsibilities, and their training and knowledge to see where it fits in the Cyber Champs organizational modules. So they use that to help companies see what kind of training they might need, see what kind of personnel, where the CIO fits in the org chart. Those two options are included in our delivery of the CSEP tool. So it's not additional charge. So these CI entities can get a no-cost assessment. They can participate in Cyber Nights. They can participate in Cyber Champs, and it doesn't cost them anything because the state's already paid for it. We're in an agreement we have with Idaho National Lab. So it's pretty good carrots for the entities to participate in. And again, we're not collecting information to identify these entities.
Sure.
Some of the early trends, I'll go ahead and share it with you now.
Yeah,
that'd be great. Questions. So 49% of the 125 that 90% or greater complete, 49% use MFA, multi-factor authentication.
Yeah.
49%. And when we think about it, when we know that over 90% of all cyber attacks are that human-machine interface, it's somebody clicking on something they shouldn't. If we could do that statewide, MFA, our vulnerability would be, I think, greatly reduced. So that's number one. And that was in our recommendations we sent to the state back in January.
Yeah, the benefit of that is, 49% may be low, but the fact that that's an easy, low-hanging fruit to adjust to be able to improve the cyber response, where you're at in that response and your risk to it. By implementing MFA, that's going to give them something they can easily go implement and make a big change in their environment.
Absolutely. And I can't imagine it would cost too much money. So that should be something easy to implement.
Right.
Another one is about 80% or so have a CIO, but also 49% have a CISO. What's unique about the CISO is 2/3 of those entities that do not have a CISO do not have a formal cybersecurity training program. So we got a pretty significant gap there, and they're kind of related with the MFA and the training.
Yeah, so that's aligning with that policy and that procedure, right, is not having somebody that's driving those policies and procedures and experience because that role doesn't exist, and that's missing from their organization. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting how that came out of the trends, and it was something we were looking at, and we saw the CISOs and we saw the training. I was wondering, is there a link? And there definitely is a link to the CISO and training. Another 49% roughly do not exercise their response and recovery plans with third parties. So their contractors, their vendors, suppliers, they don't exercise with them. Their supply chain, that could be critical. You could go out of business if one of your suppliers cannot fulfill your orders.
Yeah, absolutely. Is that the same ones? Does it align with the ones that don't have the CISOs as well?
I didn't look at it that closely.
Again, all of these things, it sounds trivial. And if you look at assessments, right? Assessments are a great first step, like we said earlier, right? It's a great place to start. And so many organizations, there's all of this technology. There's all these, high-end consultancies and all these things that you can do. And it's easy to sit on the fence and not know where to start. I don't have anything. I don't know where to begin. But something like this is a low friction, easy dipping my toe into this environment. And, I guess I kind of align it to, us going to the doctor. A lot of times we avoid going to the doctor because we don't want to see the results. We know we've probably got some problems and we just don't want to see it. I don't want to look at the scale or whatever that may be, right? But we know when we go, at the end of the day, they're giving us some actionable things. Hey, if you'll implement these things, you can have a better, cyber plan, or your overall health can be improved by taking some small actions. That doesn't mean you have to go, have an amputation or, hire 5,000 people. It can be basic things like multi-factor authentication, having a tabletop exercise and including your vendors so that it's a more complete picture. And it's not, you're already doing it potentially. Just invite the right people to the table.
That is a great point. You're probably doing them already. Just add the players that can impact your business.
Right. So what other things have you guys seen in the data and the respondents that are actually filling it out?
I'm going to change it a little bit. We get a lot of comments and concerns about, well, what's the CSET tool? Where is it? Who's storing it? So I want to share with the audience that the CSET tool, I already said, is specifically made for South Florida, and it has been downloaded onto a server at the University of South Florida. So we're the custodians. We're the ones taking care of it. We're the ones securing it. Part of our IT department. We're part of academia. So we're the ones collecting the data, analyzing it, and we're going to include it in the report, and we're going to send it to the state of Florida. State of Florida is going to enact on it. They're going to do something. I don't know what. So my call is to have all the entities, critical infrastructure entities in Florida participate and to have their voice heard.
Yeah.
There's a chance that there's going to be some sort of regulation, some sort of mandatory or executive order, some sort of legislation that's going to happen. And I think that CI entities in the state should participate and should have their voices heard for the CSET tool on the findings. These CSET tool questions are not going in depth. We're not asking any proprietary information. It's a yes or no survey. It's 156 questions. So you answer yes or no, and then we're going to be able to collect data and analyze it, working with also MITRE as another company we're working with. They're helping us formulate the report. They're helping us analyze data. They're helping us with some focus groups and with outreach so we can get out in front of the audiences and people and talk to them about this risk assessment. I wanted to make sure everyone understands that we are the ones doing this survey, not the state.
Yeah, and it's better to be part of that conversation so that your voice is heard, your concerns are heard. The intent of this sounds like it's really around providing resources and value to what needs do we have, what gaps do we have, and how do we go do something about that. And that the first step to that is really finding out where we are and, mapping that out. And, coming from my consultancy days at Ernst & Young, right, is that's one of the first things we'd usually lead with. We'd have an assessment. We'd look at where you're at. We'd have a conversation. We'd make some recommendations, and then we'd help you implement some of those recommendations. So like those are the natural steps. It's hard to go just buy technology and implement it without a plan. And the first step of a plan is knowing where you're at. When you put in your GPS coordinates, the reason that your GPS works is because it knows where you are. It knows how to get to where you're going, of course, but it has to know where you are to be able to map that. It's a different route if I start from Dallas, Texas, or, Manhattan. That's a different route to Florida. They're both going to Florida, but I'm starting from different places.
Yes, you're right. Assessment is the way to go. Now, I know a lot of critical infrastructure sectors have already gone through assessments, and because they're required for a variety of reasons.
Sure.
But unfortunately, it won't lend over to our assessment. So we will need them to contribute to the ones we're conducting, our risk assessment, so we can count their voice, included in the report. Some interesting things that have come up in the state. So the legislature also set apart some funds for training statewide. So the legislature also signed this up in Florida, and there's another individual in the office working on it. A nice lump of money so that we can conduct training for all government employees throughout the state, all levels of government. There's probably 1.1 million governmental employees in the state.
Sure.
And we have to complete this training by February of next year. So some of the findings in the CSET tool is showing that training is definitely an issue and it needs to be addressed. I'm not going to go into the training piece. That's for my counterpart. coworker and let them talk about it at another time. The state of Florida, some may have heard, has released floridacybergrants.org. So if they take this risk assessment on the CSET tool, they will get points on their grant application through the state when they apply for grant funds to help enhance their cybersecurity posture, to build resilience and preparedness. So there's a lot of good things happening in the state, not only the risk assessment, but Cyber Night, Cyber Chance, working with MITRE, INL, and working with the state of Florida, the Florida Digital Service, the grant program. All these things are really aligning to help with cybersecurity, which is a real big risk, as you know, and all the listeners know as well.
Sure. So in the short amount of time that you've been there and done this, you guys have made a lot of progress, right? And like you said, I know that there's got to be other states that are looking at this, that are watching from the sideline, seeing how well it goes in your state and what kind of commitment you get and how many people show up and ask the questions. And then what happens with that from the legislative? What mandates do they push? What legislation do they push? Regulation, et cetera. So is there any talk around or any resistance around whether people answering or from the legislator side, from the data that's coming in, or kind of what's next on what they think and see? Obviously, there's no crystal ball, but, there's a reason they're doing this. They're not just doing this to gather data. They're doing this because they want to take some actions and they don't know what to do yet, right?
That's correct. That's exactly right. They do want to take action, but they need to take smart action. And the only way to do that is to conduct a risk assessment to find out the state of the state right now as far as cybersecurity, and then be able to apply grant monies and apply or enact either laws or legislation or mandates, whatever the legislator decides to do, and the governor, to help strengthen the state. So our mission is to make Florida the most cyber secure state in the nation. And that's one of the reasons we're doing the risk assessment, as well as the training component. That's another line of funding from the state.
Now that's a bold plan, and I love it. I mean, it's really taking, the initiative. Obviously, the White House just released the national cyber policy that they came out with last week, and TSA's come out with, policy, and they're coming, they're pushing down, EPA's pushing down things. So all of these entities from a federal perspective are starting to push down things, but a lot of these entities don't fall into some of those federal guidelines of TSA or EPA or some of these others. And as we all know, like state, then federal, right? So the state, you look at Texas and all the grid things that we've had, and, being our own part of the grid, how that has caused it. It's been a good thing, and it's also caused us some problems over the past couple of years with the ice and everything else. So Florida taking, responsibility and pushing that, driving that conversation, not waiting for the federal government to do it. It's not that the federal government's not doing great things. It's like, I don't think it's enough. And the states and the entities need to step up and do more. And the state, Florida, doing this and providing grants and providing guidance and providing this capability helps to drive that conversation. Some of that may go up to federal, say, hey, here's what we're having and the struggles we're having. We need some help federally to help, bridge this gap. Some of those things, maybe the state can help from internal to the state and not have to go federal, right? And all those things can be taught to the rest of our states. At the end of the day, we're all in the same boat, and that boat is the United States. Those of us listening from the U.S., we're in this together, right? So you're from Florida, I'm from Texas, but at the same time, we're all in the same ship. And I want you to be successful so that we can copy that here and do it across multiple states, right?
Yes, that's exactly right. Everything is interrelated. They're all interdependencies, and we have cascading effects and impacts. And what's unique about what we're doing in Florida is that because we have a governor form of our government, the governor can institute, or the legislature can say, this is what we're doing in the state. Same thing can happen in any of the other 49 states. The governors can decide, we're going to put this much effort into cybersecurity. We need to have a risk assessment, and we need to have a plan to apply funds to it to increase our resilience. We have interest from the federal government and from NIST. We've had meetings with the NIST representatives. They're really interested in how we're using the cybersecurity framework to measure against the risk assessment of the entities. Now, we're going to share the report with the state of Florida. And what we also are going to do is all the participants, we will send them, they will have their report, and then we'll send them how the sector did. And you can compare yourself to the sector-wide, how you're doing.
Sure.
How are you even, or are you a little better, or are you a little worse? And then you can see the areas that you're weak, and you can make some improvements. The CSAT tool is nice because then you can take it again. You take the tool, see your assessment, apply some skills or some funds to a weak area.
Yeah.
Then you can take the CSAT again and see your score. Did it change?
Did I improve? Yep.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So I can see long term that this is going to be a regular thing. Personally, I think assessments and cybersecurity is going to be around forever.
Sure.
As long as we have the internet and computers connected to it and humans touching the keys, we're going to need it. So we're going to have to continue to do these assessments, and we need to do some validation with not only these assessments, but we can do validation with cyber range or with tabletop exercises, bring people in and test them, so to speak, to see how their knowledge is around cybersecurity.
Yeah. And, I've interviewed the CEO of Cloud Range and really talking about that training aspect, right? And the days of old where I would take a training course, maybe it's in a classroom setting or I'm learning a technology, but you talked about earlier those tabletop exercises, right? Tabletops are great going through the process, in a purely theoretical conversation. I am literally going down the procedure and I'm, reenacting that procedure. Hey, this event happened. Let's go down the call list. Let's call people, make sure they're expecting it. It's a whole nother level by taking that into a range environment where I can not only talk about it on paper, but see the SOC analyst, see the data. I can see the OT security analyst or the firewall guys and all of those different people, vendors and all the different roles, not only talk about it, but actually see it and then go through it a few times and say, hey, you missed this. You should be looking over here, because most tabletop exercises are really just looking at the procedure side of things without any focus whatsoever on the technology side of things. And the technology alone isn't valuable by itself because you need the process, but bringing those two things together is hugely powerful from a training perspective. And that's something that, again, I see this whole exercise is helping to, as together, we're rising all, tides rise all ships, right? The stronger that we get together, you're going to see things that I didn't see before as I'm comparing myself to my colleagues or my next door neighbor from a business perspective, and be able to see where they're doing well and learn from those things without releasing proprietary information or things that I don't want to share. But a lot of those things are not that. Like how I manage my patches, that's not proprietary. It's how do I respond? How do I respond to these types of events, these types of situations, these locations in Florida with hurricanes and everything else? Like it's not all cyber, but it has a cyber implication. I'm going to prepare for a hurricane and a cyber event. There's going to be a lot of similarities in there. There's a lot of differences as well, but there's a lot of similarities in how I respond to that site is offline, whether it's because a bad actor did it or because a hurricane knocked a tree into the dang place and it doesn't have power, right?
Yes. So good analogy. And you know what we're trying to do here at Cyber Florida? We're trying to prevent a cyber 9/11, basically.
Yeah.
That's what we want to avoid. And that's the reason for the risk assessment, the training, the report to the state, and see what they're going to do with it. So another thing about the risk assessment, we want the entities to do multiple assessments. Take the county, for instance. You have a water department, transportation department, you have wastewater, you have public works. Every one of them need to conduct a risk assessment. You can't do one for an entire county.
Yeah.
Another thing and we kind of knew this was going to be the case, the disparity between counties is startling.
Yeah.
We have our large metropolitan areas. They've got plenty of money. They've got staff. They have a CIO. They have a CISO. So those counties are postured well to prevent cyber attacks. And then you go to your small counties with the populations of less than 25,000. It is surprising, the difference. They probably have one person that does HR, they do procurement, they do accounts payable, and IT.
Yeah.
So we are really focusing to reach out to those small counties. And we're going to visit 2 of them in the next month. And we're going to put on not only the presentation about the risk assessment, but we're going to talk to them about the CSET tool. We'll help them log into it. We'll help them answer some questions and at least get started. And we'll deliver a tabletop exercise to help educate them about cybersecurity. Help them to begin that journey and get them to participate in the risk assessment. They are so understaffed and so overwhelmed. We know we have to get out there and reach them. And I know every state has counties in that condition, but to really have a good report, we need to hear from all the counties. And we have assessments from all the counties. We have assessments from about 12 of the 16 sectors. And we are trying feverishly to do a sector-specific attack till we can get all of them represented. And we have government sector, which has got real good representation. The other ones are probably around 20 or less. So we have a team that we have brought on. So what we did was we thought, I started early, traveling all over the state, meeting people, talking to people. And then I realized this is too much for one person. We need to bring on people that can help us. And we need to find individuals in the different regions of the state that have connections, that have contacts, that have some IT, doesn't have to be expert, just some basic knowledge to help us. So we've hired by contract ambassadors, what we're calling them. So they're regional cybersecurity ambassadors. They're going out in their regions. There are 7 to 11 counties talking about the risk assessment, meeting people, getting engagement and participation. And that's helped us go from 0 on October 21 of last year to 269 as of today. We're hoping to get to 500, and we are over halfway there, and we have about 3.5 months to go. So by June 20th, we want to be at 500 because that's the deadline for the report. We need to have it completed, have it to our executive director's office so he can review it, and then we'll send it to the state of Florida, the governor, the legislators, and the Florida Cybersecurity Advisory Council. That is a major plan. And then, like I said, we see another phase beginning after June 30th, and that we're going to continue to run the CSET tool and continue collecting data and have another report in January next year for the legislature. Then we can validate whatever training has occurred for the due date of February next year. We can run another CSET tool, and all these entities can kind of check their grade, see how they improved.
So do you feel so you've gotten to, halfway to your goal, do you feel that the ones that you haven't gotten response to is because they haven't heard about it? Because they don't have the resources to deal with it? They don't know the value of it? What do you have any idea or thoughts around what that is and why they haven't jumped on board yet?
There's a couple of reasons. The one I hear the most is they don't have the time.
Sure.
People are with reduction in workforce, budget constraint. You have one person doing 2 jobs, wearing 2 hats. They just don't have the time to do it. Other ones they don't have the knowledge, the technical knowledge to do it. Because like in a small county, they have multiple hats. Another one is they're really concerned where the data is going, who's hosting it, who's protecting it. And some are really concerned that just by their email address, because you have to sign in with an email address in order to do the CSET tool, they don't even feel comfortable putting the email address into the CSET tool. So there's a couple of different reasons. And some haven't heard about it, although I think a lot have, especially in the government sector. The hardest one to get is private sector, which I'm thinking should be fairly easy. They're not paying for it. Right? They can get their own reports, and then they can apply them at their will, wherever they want. And like I said earlier, we're all interconnected.
Yeah.
We're all interdependent. There's no way we could have done this risk assessment for just public. Because every entity, like I said earlier, uses electric and water and communication. I don't care if you're public or private, big or small.
Yeah.
We all use those 3. And if
absolutely
go down, we'd all be impacted.
We're all going to suffer.
Yes. Yes.
So what resources and what ways can you alleviate some of those problems? So if it's an entity and I don't have the cycles, I don't have time, like how long does it take to do this? If I were to sit down at my desk and dig into the CSET tool. I've done it before, but I'm asking for your perspective. How long do you think it takes to get to the end, from the beginning to the end? If I were to sit down and dedicate until I finished it, is it a day? Is it 2 days? If I knew all the questions, right?
Yeah. Fortunately, they're all yes or no, so that makes it easier. And I have asked people in my outreach efforts, have you taken it? How long did it take? So I've heard estimates from 1 hour to 2.5 to 3 hours to get it done. So it does not take a whole day. But if you have the right people to take the assessment, you get done quicker. Sometimes it's going to take multiple days because you may answer a series of questions. That's what your knowledge base is. And then you log out of the tool. And when you log back in, it'll take you where you left off because you need someone else there to answer the other types of questions. So we also want those individuals with IT knowledge to take the assessment, but we also want OT to take the assessment.
Sure.
So we can get a nice picture.
Is there a limit on how many individuals can take it from within an organization? So you talked about IT and OT. It could be, wastewater versus generation versus gas pipeline. All those different things may answer questions differently.
Yes, you're right. But there is no limit. We need to hear from, if it's a specific critical infrastructure, we want to hear from you.
Yeah.
And you could have an assessment for your IT functions and then another assessment for your OT functions. Like the example I gave earlier about the counties. There needs to be probably 5 or 6 because you have law enforcement, you have fire, you have emergency management, bus or transportation, aviation, ports. We want from all of them at the county level so we can have a real nice report that we send to the state.
And I would assume that it would be better, even if I don't know all the questions or all the answers to all the questions, you would prefer it if I answered a fraction of those questions, the ones that I did have knowledge about, and submitted those, even if I couldn't answer all 150. Is that true?
We would like for everyone to get to at least 90% complete.
Sure.
Then we're going to count that as part of the data. If it's less than 90%, we probably won't count it. That's the number we picked early on because we may not get everyone to do 100%.
Sure.
But in order to participate in Cyber Nights and Cyber Champs, you have to be 100% complete.
Gotcha.
Participate in those 2 programs.
But will you include the data if I answered 25% because that's the only thing I had knowledge of and we didn't get the rest done in time?
Well, it will be included because Cyber Nights is going to do a overall large assessment of all the reports.
Okay.
Data. So they will include those.
So you wouldn't get all of the benefits, but that knowledge and those answers would be included in the bigger conversation for what the responses were in the program. Okay, that makes sense.
And that's how we got the original early trends that are still running true today around MFA and exercises and CIOs and CISO.
So what's the ideal candidate within an organization to do this or to take it and be responsible to make sure that their organization is pushing this forward?
So that's a good one. It really depends. It depends on the county or the company. Say a large county, Hillsborough, Miami-Dade, Orange, Duval, big counties with their own individual teams, IT and cybersecurity folks, it could be a manager. You go to a smaller county, it could be the director.
Sure.
It kind of depends. If it's a corporation, it may be an analyst, or small could be a CISO that does it. So really, when we send it out, we would like IT and OT cyber professionals to complete the CSET tool. We don't want to specifically identify it has to be a CISO or it has to be a CIO. We don't want to do that because we don't know who has the knowledge. So whoever has the knowledge is the one we want to complete the CSET tool.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah, this is I'm excited to hear the details and see from the sidelines being in Texas, see how other states learn from this and how we can help, and I can only imagine taking this and sharing the not the results and any of the data necessarily, but, compare the impact and the responses from different states as this thing, grows legs and goes beyond the state of Florida. And then even that next step of what comes from that, like what legislation, what findings and gaps, and what are those low-hanging fruits that, Florida can do to take action and provide, that first step of, resiliency for, securing Florida.
Yes, I agree completely. Something that I've thought of is that Florida is probably going to be a picture of the nation.
Yeah.
Whatever we find in our report probably can be applied to all the other states, slightly different percentages, but it's probably the same thing. Probably MFA is an issue with all the other states. Training is an issue. The exercises with third parties is an issue. Your CISO and CIOs, they're all, it's going to probably be close percentage-wise if you were to do this in other states. So, we could do all the work here in Florida. All they got to do is look at our trends, and then they can enact rules and don't have to lift a finger to do anything.
Make assumptions based off the data that you gather in Florida and use that in their own state and adjust for numbers and counties and all that kind of stuff, right?
You're right.
Yeah.
It's a shotgun effect, but hey,
Sure.
if you apply some funds to it based on these findings from Florida, you're going to increase and improve your preparedness and resilience without a doubt.
And you're not just shooting in the dark. You have some numbers to back it up based on data that you've got in. So yeah, absolutely. And that trend would, pretty much be the same across all industries even, a small, you talked about small counties versus large counties. And it's the same with small companies versus large companies. Like the large companies have entire organizations. Smaller companies may have a guy, right? He's wearing multiple hats, or girl, and they're wearing multiple hats and they're doing multiple things and they're very good at their job, but there's only one of them.
Yes. Yes. Very true.
Well, hey, tell me what is something that you're excited about? Obviously, this is something that's exciting to me, but over the next 5 to 10 years that you're excited and positive about upcoming in the cyber world, and maybe something that's concerning and a little scary over the next 5 to 10 years that you see.
Tell you, I get up every morning and I'm thinking, who can I meet today? Who can I talk to today about this risk assessment? Because this is an initiative that is so important to the state, to the citizens, and to the nation.
Yeah.
And really globally, as everyone in the globe is subject to a cyber attack. So
Yep.
I get up motivated to do what I'm doing. What I'm hoping to see over the next 5 years is that we continue with this momentum. Sure, we have 269 right now. By June, we want 500, but there's probably over 20,000 critical infrastructure sectors in Florida.
Wow.
Probably. We have almost 5,000 water utilities in the state alone.
Yeah.
That is an enormous number. So in the next 5 years, I'd like to see us get tens of thousands of critical infrastructure entities in the CSET tool, completing the tool, so that we could really get a robust report for the state. And that would actually be a report card. So right now, this year, we are establishing a baseline for the state. This is where we are at right now, 2023. This is our cybersecurity posture. 5 years from now, we can have 10,000 entities in there that have participated, which will be 4 years after the implementation of the training programs through the state, 4 years after the grant that the state has implemented, and DHS, CISA has also announced cybersecurity grants that they can use this risk assessment to apply for grants through CISA and through the state of Florida. So they get funding from federal and state to help patch those vulnerabilities or close those gaps.
For higher resources.
Yes. 5 years, we can do a lot of good work in increasing and improving our resilience and preparedness against cyber attacks. What scares me the most is a continued attack on the U.S. and Florida. We get attacked, I don't know what the number is, thousands of times a day.
Yeah.
Maybe thousands of times an hour. I don't know. I know there's people out there doing some great work to protect us, but we got to do our part to help protect ourselves.
Yeah.
So I said earlier, 90% of all cyber attacks are in the human-machine interface, someone clicking on something they should not have.
Yeah.
So if we can train them up and get them better educated and give them the tools to protect themselves and the companies or the governments or the entities, yeah, we're going to make a huge difference in the state and I think the nation as well.
Yeah, that's probably the thing that's the most exciting for me is to see Florida doing this and, see all the things that are coming out of the federal, again, the White House and CISA and all of these organizations, NIST even coming out with an updated NIST, 2.0 framework. All of these things are great things and it's needed. And seeing the state of Florida doing it as well is exciting, right? And I really hope these other states really follow suit, whether it be run their own CSET, in some similar program. If nothing else, just gain from the knowledge that you guys have and implement some of those findings in their state. That's awesome. So last question, like, what is a call to action? So who do you want to understand? What do you want them to do? Who are the people you want to talk to? Like, this is your time. Like, tell them what you need.
I want all critical infrastructure sectors and subsectors to participate in the risk assessment. So some people always ask me, well, what is critical infrastructure? Well, there's 16 sectors. We have chemical, we have commercial, which commercial is wide band.
Yeah.
But hey, if you don't have a commercial sector, how are you going to buy and ship goods, right?
Yep.
Critical manufacturing, dams, emergency services. We need government, finance, food and agriculture. We need transportation, nuclear, which there's 3 sites in Florida, nuclear, so very small, but it's a large consequence. It could
Absolutely. Yeah.
one of those low risk but high consequence sectors. Water and wastewater. I may have forgotten one of them, but we want all of them to participate in this risk assessment. So my call to action is I ask everyone that's listening that lives in Florida, works in Florida, and works for a critical infrastructure sector to participate in the risk assessment. You can opt into Cyber Nights if you like to. Download all those reports that you want. Use it as you want, public and private. I want them all to participate. And I want you to share this information with everyone in your network. Let them know, hey, I just finished a CSAT. It was easy. 158 questions, I've done an hour and a half. You should do it too. So share the information far and wide with everyone you know in your network. Customers, contractors, vendors, suppliers, you name it, because we're all interconnected. And if one sector gets hit, we're going to be impacted.
Absolutely.
We can talk about scenarios that have occurred in the past, the Colonial Pipelines, the solar winds, and other people kind of are just in a panic.
Yeah.
And we can prevent it. But we have to do an assessment first.
No, I dig it. So everybody out there, I want to see some tags on LinkedIn, tagging us in there with Cybersecure Florida, CSET, submitted, all that kind of stuff. Let's get those numbers over 500 and see what knowledge we can gain. Because like you said, right, it's not just about Florida. It's really a bigger implication across our nation and across the world, really, is really understanding what these critical infrastructures are and how do we provide these values to them and make sure that we're protecting them and we doing the important things that need to be done in these environments to make sure that when we turn that light switch on, it still works. When I turn the water faucet on, water comes out, right?
Yes.
Awesome, sir. Well, hey, man, I appreciate your time today. Thank you for diving into it with us. And I look forward to seeing all the details from what you guys find in June and continuing. I want to have this conversation and after June and figure out where you came from and how far it went. So,
that would be a really neat opportunity to kind of detail the journey.
Yeah.
Got started and what steps we took to get to that number, whatever we end up with in middle June. And I can't thank you enough for the opportunity to speak to your group. This is a thrilling environment. I loved doing this. I love speaking to people and going out and meeting people. So if you want to reach out to me, Salabarria at cyberflorida.org, or you can just get on to cyberflorida.org and you can actually inquire about the CSET tool or the risk assessment, and one of us will get in touch with you. We'll go to you in person, if you like, to talk to your groups. And we'll explain the CSET tool. We'll show you a deck that shows you the tool itself, and we'll make it as easy and painless as possible for you to participate.
And guys, we'll put all those links in the show notes. You can just click to get in contact with them, find those links to be able to download it and get all the information. So thank you, sir. Thanks again, and enjoy that Florida weather.
Thank you, Aaron. It's been a pleasure. You have a good day.
All right, you as well.
Thanks for listening to the Protect OT Cybersecurity Podcast. If you got some valuable information from today's show, please subscribe, rate, and review the show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more about Aaron and to get your free copy of the OT Cybersecurity Solution Buyer's Guide, go to industrialdefender.com. That's industrialdefender.com, or you can click the link in the show notes.